Good morning, everyone. As Sizwe mentioned, my name is Jess and I look after our enterprise partnerships at Stitch. I also have the privilege today to moderate the panel on what does a modern payments experience look like in South Africa today. Before we dive in, I'm told by many people that do yoga that it is important to openly announce what you're grateful for each day. So I have two things I'm grateful for today. One, I'm joined by three highly respected individuals in their relevant fields. And two, and more importantly, our panel is first, and in 45 minutes, we can lower our shoulders, relax, and enjoy the day. So I'm sorry if you are on a later panel. All right, let's dive right in with a few opening comments before I allow my panel members to introduce themselves. When we consider today's topic, the facets to explore seem pretty endless. When we say modern payments experience, sounds like a big word, many things can come to mind. A few of these could be the push of digitization, the critical need for interoperability, the importance of speed, managing that with security, and of course an emphasis on a user-centric approach, navigating regulation and compliance, and at the end of the day, constant innovation. So it's quite a mouthful, and we only have 45 minutes. In South Africa specifically, we find ourselves in a unique song and dance, and this isn't anything profound. I think we're all pretty familiar with it. We're constantly navigating all these contrasts. These could be tradition and financial inclusion versus clear innovation, specifically driven from like a global perspective, digital versus cash, banked versus the unbanked, mobile adoption, your standard USSD versus a smartphone tap and go, in-store versus online, speed versus security, and just simple education and understanding versus like traditional old habits. So it's multifaceted. How do we dive into it? We have a few panels today that will actually go through a few of these projects, specifically PayShap, specifically Capitec Pay, but we're going to talk about the customer experience and the payments experience and what that looks like. Good time to hand over to my panel members and give you all an opportunity to introduce yourself. So KG, I'll hand over to you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kgomotso but fondly known as KG, and I'm happy for everyone to call me KG. I am the head of digital and payments at Woolworths Financial Services, and I'm very excited to be on the panel. I think there is a big need to have more diverse voices in the payment space. It's always been banks, fintechs coming in, but we need more merchants, right? Because I've never been to a braai where a customer goes, oh, I paid my TFG account using Stitch Pay by Bank. It's usually I've paid my TFG account, right? So we need to be as obsessed with the payment experience, as obsessed with the evolution and where things are moving as the rest of the people in the room are. So I'm very excited to be here to lend that voice around retail and financial services.
Thanks, KG. Getting the plugs in for TFG and Bash already, which is fantastic. Another merchant in the room. So Bash is South Africa's #1 fashion and lifestyle app on both the Google Play and Apple App Stores. Very new to the market, came out of beta in March this year, and have been really tearing up the online space, mostly with the Foschini Retail Group brands, but looking to expand that beyond Foschini Retail Group in the next little while. My role at Bash is as head of fintech, and I'm also involved in our plans and strategies for rolling out technology that's going into our stores to enable our store staff members a digital experience to help customers. So we're very, very excited about the role of payments in that space, and hopefully I can share a little bit about where we see payments and where we see the retail and merchant experience.
Morning. So it's worth saying that Greg and I normally occupy this space with a lot of sweat playing a game of paddle. I'm glad to be here today on a more quiet note and not competitive. My name is Nkululeko Mvulana. I am part of the Lesaka Technologies Group, which is a listed company that has various operating entities underneath it, so EasyPay being one. EasyPay, I think in short, really aims to shorten the distance between bill issuers, be it municipalities that need to be paid after the event of the transaction, whether it's for prepaid electricity accounts, private billers such as telecommunications operators, the wide-ranging value-added services providers. So we aim to really aggregate that payment to a vast and multi-sectored or multi-segmented customer base to enable them to settle their payments wherever they might be conveniently. So that's the EasyPay business. We're involved in other parts of value-added services distribution. An exciting business called Kazang, which is blazing the trail in the peri-urban environments in South Africa. Again, prepayment services to a market that is predominantly cash, to various other operations in the group. Thank you.
Perfect, thanks guys. So let's go broad. You're sitting in a boardroom, you're looking at the strategy within your relevant companies, and someone says, guys, let's talk about modern payments. What comes to mind? Let's start with you, NK.
Jeez, okay.
I know,
Well,
did you see what I did there?
Right. Yeah, look, I think, so for me, there's a need to balance one's lived experience. And so obviously, myself and some of the people in this room represent a segment of the market. So one can speak from a personal point of view, but I think it's important to also assume a lived experience for the market that you provide services for. So in that respect, I think for me, just thinking out loud in terms of what applications have been impactful, certainly in my own personal capacity, I'd say, if you think about what the chip-enabled NFC cards have done to the payments industry over the past 4 years, the ability to tap and go, sometimes without the need to even provide a PIN identification number, to Face ID-enabled mobile devices. What Apple Pay has done is significant. It's created a shift in consumer behavior. So that's my interpretation of what modern payments will be able to do. You need to be able to impact behavior and create a shift in how consumers interact with payments. So for me, I think modern payments in the context of what we do, in the South African market context, needs to be able to provide a full banking solution for the foreign national who's become part and parcel of our society. I think that's a key addressable market in South Africa that's not going away. I think second to that, I think there's a need to take cash out of a retail supply chain ecosystem. So cashless payments to enable SMMEs to pay for goods and services and have them delivered without the risk of cash. And yeah, the big one is whoever solves for the taxi industry, I think will take us to the next phase in digitizing payments. So those three for me are maybe use cases that we should all think about in terms of modernizing payments.
Awesome. Greg?
Yeah, thanks, NK. I think leaning on a little bit of what you said there, for me, the two elements that spring to mind are customer or consumer experience. We touched on that quite a lot, so I won't really dive into too much of that, except to say that one of the things that we look at from a Bash perspective is payment completion rate. And one of the things we see that's driving completion rate is offering the variety of payment methods that consumers demand, being able to do that in a journey that makes sense to them, whether that's online or in store, and being able to ensure that that journey is nuanced enough to be able to deal with both of those scenarios, the digital and the physical world. And then I think the other thing that from an engineering-led organization like Bash that is very, very important in the modern payments infrastructure is the ability to be able to implement these variety of payment methods in a way that's seamless and easy. In my experience, I've been involved obviously in TFG a number of years. Traditionally, the payments in the retail space has been very, very slow-moving. very opaque, very difficult to navigate with the number of partners and payment providers out there. And I think for me, what needs to change in order for us to classify something as a modern payments ecosystem is that we need the ability to be able to switch on and off much more seamlessly, much more easily. We need information around integrations much more available. Even to this day, the ability to switch on a new payment method in our business, I'm not saying this is the case in every business, requires an inordinate amount of time and investment and corralling multiple people into meetings to be able to actually switch on a new method. So for me, I think one of the focus areas needs to be in that engineering space, the ability to make things super seamless and easy as well.
So, Jess, I think you mentioned it. It's around speed and security and flexibility of your payment, and making sure that the underpinning payment systems are evolving with technology. But I think a lot of that focuses on a certain group of customers who are now used to paying like that, who have adopted these. At WFS, we deal with a little bit of a different customer, a customer who's still paying their accounts in cash, a customer who doesn't have access or is not using digital payments as often. So for me, modern payments should, yes, be about that, but who are you also trying to get into this ecosystem? So it's about, yes, that financial inclusion, but deepening that, right? So making sure that the payment system is available to everyone, and more people can understand it, trust it, use it, and that's by making it cost effective. I think that's one of the biggest things that we need to think about, is how you make it cost effective, and then ensure that it's speaking the same language so more people can understand. So make it customer friendly, ensuring the customers are really, you focusing on them and bringing them on the journey as well.
Sure. And maybe to dive into that a bit more specifically on the Woolies breakdown, because you mentioned there WFS having a completely different either consumer or use case of buying. I think there we go more into the account payments as well, similar to what you would see, I guess, in all three of your worlds. How easy is that to navigate in a big business where you're dealing with multiple different consumers? I mean, we're starting with the omni-channel to groceries, clothing. I'm talking about all the things I buy on a daily basis, which fortunately I do. Maybe not my account as much, but we'll get there. But you have all of this on a single app. You've got multiple payment methods. You don't want to overwhelm the consumer, but I think maybe I might be assuming here, but we find with a lot of businesses, they're on these legacy systems, and it's you have to do the same amount of work 10 times over for what should be a click of a button. I think that's something that a lot of people are lacking. Do you experience that? Are you working on it? How is that working in the Woolies world?
So you're right, we do deal with a diverse set of consumers. Woolworths has a high LSM customer who is digitally enabled, understands it, uses the payments, but then WFS has a different customer that we need to think about. So currently, yes, we've got a limited set amount payment methods, but again, how do you introduce payment methods in such a way that a customer's not sitting there and saying, oh my gosh, I don't know which one to go for? We are seeing consumers though being more demanding on us, saying we do want more payment methods. We are seeing the need for instant EFT come into our space. We just launched our buy now, pay later solution, but the focus now is to say, we can't add everything, especially because we've built our own infrastructure internally. How do we partner for success to move faster? It's not easy if we continue building our own things. We're going to only introduce a payment method once a year, and that's not sustainable. That doesn't make us competitive. So now it's time to think about how do we partner with everyone in this room? How do we change that? But also balancing who our customer is and who we want to bring on board. So it's very important to us to say we don't want to add everything. We want to add targeted methods that we know are going to work for the people that we have in our stable.
For sure. And Greg, in your world with Bash, I think we've spoken about it a little bit, how TFG has been a traditional business around and Bash has recently launched. I think you've been in the thick of it very recently.
Yeah, we, I guess, are in that situation where Bash is the new upstart in this 100-year-old business. We're having to navigate very different cultures within the Bash team and the traditional TFG team. We've got disparate channels, so stores and online are treated very differently currently. And so our challenge is, I guess, bringing all of those together in a way that's as seamless as possible for our customers. The opportunity we think to do that is with the Bash store technology that we're going to be launching soon. That's essentially taking all the capabilities of our modern tech stack that we use for our digital commerce platform and bringing that into the hands of our store staff members. The ultimate there, from a payments experience, is ultimately getting the payment methods that we have available to our in-store shoppers available online as well. There's quite a big difference in terms of what a customer walking into our store is able to use versus what they're currently able to use online. So I think from that perspective, quite a lot of investment is going in to that within the Bash team. We're at the very early stages of testing and learning, taking our e-commerce and digital experience and applying that into an in-store context. We had some of our first production tests in-store yesterday on that Bash store app. And online world, you don't really consider physical infrastructure too much. You make a change once on your website, on your app, and you're pretty much able to roll that out. In store, you're dealing with thousands of staff members now who you need to work through. You need to make sure that their experience is as good as the consumer's experience. You're dealing with all the vagaries of in-store networks and Wi-Fi in stores. So we're going to have to learn those things. We're going to have to learn how to navigate those best as possible. And then, ultimately all of that comes together when the customer wants to buy your product in store, and the moment of truth is that the payment methods all work and they go through seamlessly. So, yeah, I think lots of work for us to do.
Actually, often don't consider like the internal education piece and just your staff across all these different stores. I mean, the last thing you want is a consumer coming to purchase and they don't know, and I'm sure that's very tricky. NK, I think for your world where in most experience paying your bill is not exciting, I think with a lot of the services that you offer, traffic fine, you've obviously been a little naughty, so you're expecting that you don't want to pay. It's going to be an underwhelming experience for you, probably something that's going to be in cash, in person, or you're going to not be able to make your payment. Talk to me a bit about EasyPay and what you tried to solve and the payment methods or the orchestration that you chose when you were going through your digital journey.
Yeah, look, there's a lot. I mean, some of the current constraints, if we look at our online environment, which is necessary, right, and it serves a specific customer at the moment, over 90% of those transactions are presented, are settled via credit card. Our financial model is a capped transaction model, rand capped, so there's a fixed amount that you get paid to fulfill that transaction. In there is a fee to the bank. So card schemes and obviously we got bankers in here, so I don't want to be disparaging. But one of our biggest challenges is that presenting a credit card to our environment adds an inhibitive cost, which traditionally, obviously we were able to pass upstream to the biller. And at this point, billers are running out of budget. Municipalities are, we know how, maladministration, all sorts of constraints that they're going through. So that specific charge needs to be taken out of the equation, which has led us to explore other payment types, such as instant EFT. But we all know, much as it's cheaper than the card schemes, albeit still more expensive than cash, is I think there's a lot of suspicion around instant EFT. Now, for a guy like me, again, my lived experience is I can never remember my payment, my profile, my online banking profile credentials. So instant EFT doesn't help me. But generally, I think for the wider audience or wider market, there's a suspicion around instant EFT and kind of labeled screen scraping. So you've got to find a different solution. I think tokenization is that solution, potentially. It's much cheaper, link pay. If you trust that EasyPay is going to fulfill your payment, you will present your bank details and tokenize it, and that's how you pay. But tokenization or link pay hasn't solved a problem which is acute in our environment, where we always have to take the transaction upstream. A prepaid electricity transaction is a real-time transaction. We've got to send it up, But the only time we send it up is after we've taken your money. And then we're at the mercy of the municipalities to fulfill it within the 60-second time frame that it needs to be fulfilled. In the event that it doesn't get fulfilled, you've got an irate customer that might not come back. So we've got to think about how all of these improved or enhanced payment types correspond with the use cases and obviously the steps that the customer needs to take to fulfill that or settle that transaction.
Thanks. Inke, if this panel was last year, when we just did instant EFT, we would have had words after that comment. But no, but I think true to what you're saying, like we've merged into a whole lot of other brands or other payment methods. We don't actually reference it as instant EFT anymore. I think we want to promote what we've seen with Capitec Pay, Pay by Bank. I think it's immediately trusting. We've seen that like being a super success within the banking ecosystem. And I agree, like being able to launch these new methods that come out, be cost effective, managing it. I think something that always sticks out for me, and Kian referenced it with a few of the products that we've done, is as myself as a consumer, when I think about a modern payments experience, outside of all the nitty gritty, I just want to pay when I want to pay, how I want to pay. Like, I don't really worry. I mean, you mentioned it earlier, KG, like you're not paying with Stitch, you just want to pay off your account. And I think uptime is super important. Then it goes to like the bigger system of being able to click a button and you're able to seamlessly fail over. You have that redundancy, you have the choice, but then you're also managing your different costs. How's orchestration playing? It's a big space for us at the moment. I think we're super excited about it, both online and also managing the omni-channel. How is that happening currently? Is it more like a provider approach and then you look at redundancy? Is it something that, I think KG, you mentioned it, so maybe we can start with you, is one payment method which is maybe slow. That's quite scary on multiple different providers for that redundancy play. If you do a payment method, or do you do the same method, just different provider?
So I can't step too much into this. I'm trying to think now how to answer you on that. But like I said, what we've seen is the space is moving very fast, right? So you have to think about how you keep up and how do you keep up with everything that's happening. We actually sat in a session specifically around, so what is our next step with our current infrastructure? I said Woolies is primarily, we've built our own systems, we've built our own play on that. But now it's time to move, right? It's time to make sure that we are keeping up, we are having the payment methods that customers want. So for us, it's purely around partnership at this point. Really, how do we partner for success? How do we then have those conversations, or the right people in the room to have those conversations with us? Because our job is to, one, sell credit, and our other job is to sell bananas. Our job is not purely payments. So the idea is to then say, who can actually give us the right advice around that? Who can sit there and partner with us? I think Ian said that you guys will go to war with your partners when you have them. We're really looking into that now and saying, how do we then partner for that success?
You do sell good bananas, so kudos to that. Inke, you kind of referenced it earlier on the cash side. I think it is something that we should discuss, because the drive to a cashless environment, you mentioned like the taxis would probably be super innovative with that. I personally don't think it's going to go away. I think maybe a year ago we often spoke about the COVID shift and how everyone had gone digital. At least what I'm hearing in my conversations is that is stagnating and kind of going back. People are going back to the old habits, a lot of their preference specifically in the lower LSM. Greg, for Bash specifically, because TFG was mostly brick and mortar, I think there was maybe an importance on cash there, or at least maybe when you're purchasing, getting your refunds. I know that I've done that. How is like Bash transitioned out of that? How are you catering for, I guess, like the low LSM and cash environment that previously existed?
Can I come to your question now? I just want to quickly comment on something KG said as well.
And interrupt, hey, just go.
So I think, I mean, just the way we're thinking about redundancy and orchestration is that whilst partners are important, the ultimate decision and the data that's used to make the decision around where to send payment needs to be sitting with Bash. And so I think we're still relatively immature there. We don't have the capabilities that we think we need to have. But the critical point for us is that we don't want to outsource the decision. We don't want to outsource the data that's used to make those decisions around redundancy and switching of transactions. And we need to be able to do that in real time. So I think for where we're starting to invest and starting to think about redundancy and orchestration, that's certainly going to be a key theme for us in the new year. Once we get through Black Friday and season, I'm sure that's going to be top of mind for my payments team. To maybe come to your question, just in terms of how we dealing with cash in the Bash context, it's a big challenge for us. So one of the things, we're not as reliant on cash in our physical store as some other retailers. I was at another conference a couple of months ago where one of the retailers was saying they're 90% cash still, which just blows my mind. It's insane. We're probably sitting at around 25% cash on average, which is still a sizable chunk of our business. And certainly when we start looking at the tech that we want to install, put into stores from a Bash store point of view, we've said it's too big for us to ignore. The sad reality is that we don't have a great solution at the moment for dealing with cash. We think we can deal with card, we can deal with our own TFG money solution, we think we can deal with tokenization, EFT. All of those I think are solved, but the cash solution is not something that we think we've solved yet. We've proposed a few things to our business in terms of how we believe we can manage that. And they've either been rejected due to risk or rejected due to the consumer experience that we would have to subject our customers to. So I think, with everyone's talking about RPP, PayShap as potentially the replacement for cash within our economy. Really, from a merchant perspective, we're super hopeful for when request to pay arrives. Hopefully that's sort of first quarter, second quarter next year. I'm sure we'll chat to Colin a little bit later and get some inside info. So for us, we're hopeful that PayShap deals with elements of that, but I think there's going to be a bit of a long tail that we still need to deal with. Cash may be convenient for the consumer, but it's a real pain for the merchant.
Any thoughts, Nk?
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not sure that anything that's in the market right now will solve the cash demand, which we certainly see in our space. So cash, I think for us, if you think about our collectors in the EasyPay context, so a collector is a retailer, for example. They don't want their till points bottlenecked by a customer who's coming to pay for a low margin product, which is non-core to them. So yes, I'm coming to pay my bill, it's 50 Rand. They don't want to have to deal with long queues of those type of guys because they don't make enough money out of it. They're hoping that customer will pass from one till, value-added services, to buy their core products where they make a good margin. The customer doesn't want to go to multiple steps to settle a transaction. They just want to get there, present the EasyPay number, make a payment. The biller doesn't want to pay more for a transaction which traditionally, costs them maybe 0.5%, if that. We certainly don't want to bear inordinate fees, which are bank-led or fintech-led. So any solution to cash needs to take that into account. You talk about PayShap. My own opinion is that PayShap is a reality that we all have to embrace. I don't know that it's a replacement to cash more than perhaps a competitor to card, which is good for us. But it's got to be priced right. So our ecosystem is so constrained that you cannot introduce more cost to settle an existing transaction. You've got to add more transactions to make it viable for all the participants in the value chain.
Interesting, and Colin, I hope that it's not being referenced, I don't know where you are referenced in your panel later, but you mentioned yesterday the goal is to actually get the average order value down because that means it's becoming more a habit. Consumers are using it more frequently, and you're seeing that shift already, which is super exciting. It's not like a once-off fee that, I think historically, if you think of an instant payment, you're willing to take the chunk of the fee because you need it urgently and it's often like a higher order value. If we can get to the point where you're right, Inky, where you're happy to do it at a 50 Rand level and it's just constantly happening, I think we'll see a huge drive. And I think your comment on like the competition to card there is also important. I know at least for myself as a consumer, I'm using PayShap. I told everyone yesterday actually that I was telling all my friends about it and they all told me to stop selling them Stitch. And I was like, guys, this is a national thing. Like, this is not a Stitch product. And they're slowly kind of edging into it, which is good. Maybe something else to think about is with cash and kind of the omni-channel space. KG, can you talk to me a little bit about on the Woolies Financial Services with regards to like just general Woolies, how that works? So how does Woolies Financial Services play in the omni-channel space?
So before that, on PayShap and it being a replacement to cash, I think you're only going to start seeing it becoming a real replacement for cash when it's got the perceived benefits that cash has, right? So the moment we start adopting it as merchants and people can use it anyway, similar to using cash anyway, the moment there's trust in it and the moment we educate the customer properly on it, then you'll start seeing it. So the lady who did my hair, she came over and I was like, do you have a shop ID so I can pay you? And she was like, no. I'm like, why? You know, what's the problem with that? And she's like, well, they said my phone number is across all my accounts. And you know South Africa is a movie. So if someone can get my phone number, they've got access to all my accounts. And then, so I was like, okay, that's the perception there is there, you know? So I think there's a lot of work that we need to do to make sure that PayShap works. It's not just BankServe or the Reserve Bank that has to think about it. It's how do we then say, okay, how do we embed it and how do we become early adopters as merchants as well? I think there's quite a few examples of people trying to do that before Request to Pay comes into place. So how do you use the current rails, the current proxies to say, can I allow a customer to pay my account on my WFS PayShap ID? Is there that type of thing? Then recon becomes a big conversation. But I think if we start becoming early adopters of it as merchants, you'll start seeing it filter out to the rest of the communities. And your question was around omnichannel. So in WFS, we actually did a piece of research around how people pay their accounts and across our competitors, what options do they offer? And there's a whole thing around, do you guys have the digital options? But we said, let's actually look at our customer behavior right now. Only 1/3 of our customers are on our app. So majority of our customers are still going in store to pay their accounts. They're still paying with cash. 40% of our payments are in cash in store. So we said, we obviously want to move our customers into app as much as possible, making it a cheaper payment method for us, but we need to incentivize that. We need to get customers thinking differently about paying online. So we've got multiple ways for customers to pay their accounts, and I think that's one of the biggest things in collections. We say, is it possible for you to pay? There's no excuse for you to pay. You can pay at the ATM, you can pay in store, you can pay at an ABSA branch.
EasyPay.
you can easy pay. So that's our approach to it, to say, let's give customers as many options as possible. And our Pay My Account feature only went live about 3 years ago, if I'm correct. So we were slow in moving into digital because we saw a lot of customers. So now we're trying to move them into that as well and bring them along on the journey. So our approach is, let's cater for all the offline payments because it is majority of our customers, but let's also try and give customers new ways and then educate them on those new ways. I mean, we're looking at how do we do chat commerce or how do we do chat to pay? Is there a possibility there that could open up something for us? And it's about balancing the channels to what your customers also prefer as well.
Interesting you say that because I used to pay my Woolies account at the till until Woolies Dash, and I was being prompted to the app more frequently, being reminded that maybe my account was in arrears, and then slowly started paying. But super interesting, that's only 1/3 of your consumer base on the app. I like what you mentioned there about conversational commerce, but I want to rather take it to the audience because I am conscious of time and just ask any questions if anyone has anything they'd like to add. Obviously, don't all go at once.
This is what I'm good for.
Hi guys, I just wanted to find out, and I think KG, you touched on it, around what do consumers actually prefer to use for payment, and where do you think the responsibility for the education lies? Is it the merchant? Is it the consumer? Who gets to tell them this is what PayShap is and this is why you should use it, you know? Because a lot of the times you go and you see 5 different ones and maybe you know like 1 out of like all 5. Where do I then, and I'm not going to take the time to go and actually find out, okay, what were the other 4 payments that I just saw?
So, well, because we were slow on the digital and only launched our Pay My Account on on app or online 3 years ago, customers are still used to paying in store. Like I'm saying, we're seeing most of it being in cash, in store at POS. That also has something to do with around the speed to spend after that, because as soon as you pay, you can spend in store. So I think that drives the behavior of customers choosing that. But that's in our space specifically, and I know in others it's a bit different. And then in terms of the responsibility on education, it's a big one. We've had this debate many times. Are we responsible for saying to customers, this is, financial education, we need to show it to you? I really think we are. I really think at the end of the day, like I said earlier, customers are not saying, I paid my Woolies account via XYZ or Orange Payment Gateway, and it was so easy. It's I paid my Woolies account, I paid on the app, or I went in store and paid my account. And we're now responsible to make sure that customers know the options that they have, know that this is easier, more cost effective, and also mixing our business objectives, obviously, because we are driving a certain strategy. So I do think the responsibility does lie on merchants. There is, and for me, that's where adoption will happen, because people are looking at you as Woolworths, or looking at you as Fashini, or looking at you as Superbalist, They're not looking at necessarily the guys who are there doing the payments in the background.
Maybe to add to that, I think it's a responsibility you should want to own, because at the end of the day, you want your consumers to pay, but you as the receiver, you want at least a decent rate, as you mentioned earlier, but you want a payment that's irrevocable and instant, especially if you're fulfilling orders. There's a huge risk if that's not the case. So if a payment method exists where that can happen, it's your responsibility to push it for your business. And I think maybe the nice thing about PayShap is it's starting on a peer-to-peer level. So I think I urge everyone, if you are doing something with your friends, if you're going with your family, and the normal thing, I'll pay on instant EFT, I'll get it 2 days later, push PayShap, create a narrative around it, PayShap me. I think that helps a lot, where people becomes a non-event. I think that's what we're all here to do, create payments a non-event. And I always go back to what you say, just pay the account, not how, when, who.
Can I just maybe add to Kg's answer? I think it's a great answer, actually, and a good question. The challenge is that I don't think we think a lot about who's in the value chain. It's easy to identify our consumer, the end consumer. You know what your product functionality, what you're offering to the consumer, but the delivery to that consumer goes through multiple value chain partners. In the case of Woolies, and I'm glad KG has accepted that the responsibility is hers, and I saw my team nodding there because it's a hot topic, is that we face multiple types of merchants up and down the food chain. So up the top of the food chain is the likes of Woolies, and we need to find a way to get into a conversation with Woolies to design what that message might look like to the end consumer about our product, EasyPay or whatever it is. But down the food chain, you have small SME type merchants who are disparate. They're all over the country. They speak multiple languages. Some are Somali, some are Bangladeshi, some are Pakistani. So traditionally, what our messaging needs to change, and it needs to, we need to accept that there is a merchant that needs to be educated, not just the consumer. So we need to, accept that the responsibility is ours to educate the merchant to be able to pass that information on to the consumer. By ours, I mean Stitch.
Yeah, thanks guys. This is a great panel. I think a more practical question my side. We've got a lot of clients that are in positions where their business have been in operation for 20, 30, 40 years. And suddenly you've got these digital arms that's starting to take over the new move. And I think question directed to you, Greg. There's the infrastructural navigation that comes with new payments, innovation in the space. But how do you navigate the cultural element of when you've got these two forces that you need to deal with in a system where you've got a business that needs to be agile, adapt quickly, change quickly, but you also have the mothership that you need to take into account with?
Sure, if I had the answer to that. Yeah, it's certainly challenging. So the reality is from a Bash and TFG mothership relationship, we have to work extremely hard. We have to have respect for each other's goals and outcomes. We're measured differently. Bash is measured on speed, innovation, customer experience, ability to change rapidly. TFG, as the mothership, has a different cadence and a different risk profile and different risk appetite. So from our perspective, it's certainly challenging. Certainly can't lie about that. It requires a deep investment in time and in relationships, in ensuring clarity of purpose and thought about why Bash, for example, is going out to do things fundamentally differently to the traditional business. We've got various, methods of doing that. We're trying to standardize on some basics like common collaboration tooling. Bash is Google and Slack, TFG is Teams, and email and meetings. So just even those basics we're still challenged with. But I guess the answer is it's a work in progress. We think it's critical to achieve some kind of symbiosis and balance between the two organizations. We are, after all actually after the same goal. We're just going about it slightly differently. So I don't think I've 100% answered your question, but yeah, hopefully some insight.
If I can just add to that, because that's so interesting. There was a time when a move around digital is take everyone from digital innovation, shift them out, move them into a whole different building, let them be creative, but then they get constrained by the mothership and everything that they have to look at when they go back there. And at Woolies, there was a point where that happened, where there was a whole team that was shipped out. They got MacBooks, they got Google, they got Slack.
Yeah, don't worry, we shipped out.
But we realized that, well, that's not actually working out because you still have to, work in the confines of your sponsor, actually. So now the move is to come back and actually embed the culture of digital in the organization and make sure everyone is running in that pace, make sure that innovation is embedded in the mothership rather than something that a certain group of special people do outside. It's not easy. There is no, this happens tomorrow and everyone understands how the space works and everyone is going to work like that. But I think from my view, and personally, I think embedding digital and innovation into your whole structure makes for faster change than shipping them out. I was one of those that were shipped out at some point, but...
I'd like to add one thing. I mean, it's so interesting to hear from one of our competitors is in the same space, going through the same challenges. I think the one other thing to add to the question and the answer is that the courage to disagree is critical, and you will disagree. You have completely different perspectives, but the ability to surface those disagreements, try and work through them. You win some, you lose some, but hopefully with clarity of thought. And one of the things that Bash does, I think, pretty well is document our thought process. So we can lay it out, we use data, we can explain why we're taking a particular approach. And when you can do that, I think a lot of the emotion is taken out of the decision.
Cool.
Perfect, we are at time. Maybe one more thing to add is, just as we close off, you talk about the mothership. I've not been in a conversation where a company hasn't said to me, like, oh, we can go do all these digital ideas, but at the end of the day, the head seat at a table is finance, and the first question is, how do we recon this? So I think there's the mothership, and then there's the pilot, which is finance, that we all need to navigate. But yeah, thanks so much, everyone. Thank you, guys. Great chat. I hope you all enjoyed it.
Just leave it on the chair. Thanks to our panelists. Thanks to our moderator, Jess. KG, you mentioned that Woolworths has many different payment options. My mother knows very well. She recently figured out that she could pay via the app, not PayShap. But yeah, since she's been doing that, the credit card bill is way higher on a monthly basis. So great. I totally agree with the future of payments. I come from an area where cash is still key. And at the same time, the ramifications of having cash are also just as high. I think one thing that we do have as an ecosystem in banking and payments is generally upskilling the users, specifically in places where cash has been used. If you look at the demographics of those spaces, it tends to be the ones that require it the most, but also require the training the most.